Well, hello everyone. I really hope this is going to work. It's Sunday afternoon for me where I'm at here in California. I'm here in Oceanside, California, and well, clearly that's the mighty Pacific right behind me, and Oceanside Pier is about a half a mile that way right there, so you know right where I'm at. I'm just right here on the Strand. Came down for a short vacation before the travel schedule picks up and gets really crazy. Welcome tonight. Thank you for joining me. Now, the first thing I wanted to make mention of to you is that I'm working on another book. It's called Divine Interventions. It's a collection of stories, a book about people, both members of the church and not, and it'll be for everyone, of stories where the Almighty intervened in a person's life in a remarkable, miraculous way to help them. It's called Divine Interventions. I'm going to be talking about it a lot. If you have anyone in your family or an experience you've had that can be shared about a time when the Almighty intervened in your life to help you or someone you love, send those stories to me. I would love to have them. You can send them either to Glenn at glennrawsonstories.com, or you can send them to support at glennrawsonstories.com. Stories of divine intervention. I would love to have them. Okay? So just letting you know that that book is forthcoming. All right, now, the next thing. The book that I've been talking about in celebration of America 250, The God of This Land, Stories of the American Founding, that book is doing really well, and we still have copies of it. Of course, I don't have one right here with me right now, but if you would like to get a copy of that book, The God of This Land, Stories of the American Founding, go to glennrawsonstories.com and it's available. It's a great book for America 250. And last, before I begin tonight, next January, I love this tour. I'm taking another group and we're going back to Hawaii, to Oahu, and we'll do church history and Hawaiian history on the island of Oahu, January 2027. You'd like to go? If you're interested that far out in advance and can plan for it, January in the Islands, Glenn Rawson and Church History. If you're interested, go to glennrawsonstories.com. All right, first story for tonight, and again, as always, I ask you to have a prayer in your heart because I'm going to be sharing 6 stories that I hope will have some measure of inspiration for you. Just a few days ago, I went out for a walk on the East Bench, the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, above Draper, Utah. While I was walking along the benchlands, I saw a tall, skinny plant with pretty yellow blossoms. Now, ever since I was a student in wildlife and plant science at BYU, that kind of thing has always fascinated me. I didn't recognize this plant. So, of course, I stopped, I studied it, and I looked it up to see what it was. I got the name, and I thought to myself, I've never heard of that plant. That can't be right. Those guys at BYU never told me anything about that plant. I must have it wrong. So I looked it up. 3 times I looked it up, and each time it came back with the same result. The plant is called Dyer's Woad. Dyer's Woad. Or if you prefer the Latin genus and species, it's Isatis tinctoria. Not that that would mean anything to you. Well, the plant fascinated me, so I studied some more about it. Turns out that Dyer's Woad is not native to Utah. It was intentionally brought here in the 19th century by European pioneers. It originated in semi-arid climates somewhere around the Mediterranean. That's why it grows so well in Utah. Now, there was a time, and this is my point, there was a time when this plant, Dyer's Woad, was an extremely valuable cash crop. For what? Well, it was used to produce beautiful indigo blue dyes in fabrics. But then, as time went on, synthetic means were found to produce indigo dye easier and cheaper, and Dyer's Woad went out of use. Well, what was once a valuable cash crop then became, at least in Utah, a Class B invasive species, a toxic, noxious, unwanted weed that everyone now is trying to eradicate. Interesting how that works. Now, there are a few who cling to the old traditional ways, who still cultivate Dyer's Woad, and they use it to make blue dye for plants, or for clothing and so forth. It's interesting also to me that Dyer's Woad makes indigo blue, or the color of royalty, royal blue. Now, I went a little further, and it turns out that the way that the dye is made is, according to some people, absolutely miraculous. How did you make it? You took the leaves off of Dyer's Woad, and they crushed them all up. Then they used different means to ferment the leaves. Kind of stinky. Once the process was done and everything was fermented, what you had left was this fermented yellowish green liquid in a vat. And when you dipped the fabric into it, and you pulled it out, it came out soaked in the same yellowish green goo. But then when the yellow-green soggy fabric was pulled out and hit the open air, the green suddenly turned into a royal deep blue. It was considered one of the small miracles of pre-industrial life. Dyer's Woad. From miraculous, valuable, and wonderful to weed. What a story. Now you of course wonder why I'm telling you this, because I couldn't help but think of the Lord God of Israel and the endless cycles of pride and humility among men and nations across history. Like Dyer's Woad, when men were humble and recognized Him as their Lord, their God, and their King, their royalty, they prospered and were beautiful and fair. But when they forgot Him and no longer valued Him and His commandments, when God became an unwanted weed in their lives, well, then they were destroyed. A beautiful yellow flower high up in the mountains of Utah will ever be my reminder to humble myself and remember who He is and what miracles He still has to give to me. Second story. July 16th, 1847, just a ways to the north of where I am right now, near Fort Moore in Los Angeles, California, the Mormon Battalion was discharged from the United States Army. Those men had marched 2,000 miles in order, and now, once they were discharged, they now had more than 2,000 miles, some of them, to go back to find their families, who could be anywhere from the Mississippi River to the east to the Salt Lake Valley on the west. Daniel Tyler was one of those men, anticipating his discharge and planning to turn south. He was going to go south down to San Diego, and then he was going to go up the old Spanish Trail out of San Diego all the way into the Salt Lake Valley. That was his planned route. Well, while he was contemplating that, and just before the men were released in July of 1847, Daniel experienced a dream or a vision which he related as follows. I quote, "First, I thought a man clothed in white came to my tent door having a bottle in his hand filled with liquid resembling olive oil. Reaching out to me, he said, "Take this and drink of it. It is the pure love of God that casteth out all fear, and causeth men to draw nigh unto God." I drank 2 swallows, he said, and returned the bottle. The eyes of my understanding were then opened, and I was filled with the glory of God throughout my whole system. I saw, now the vision opens up, I saw that we traveled northward and subsequently eastward instead of south and east as anticipated. At arriving at this rancho, that rancho he's describing is called Pico's Ranch, north and east of here. He said, "I thought we had passed all the wild animals that sought to destroy us or impede our progress, which it appeared were numerous and strong, the last being a lion, which I instructed the company to pass without halting or seeming to notice. On arriving at the creek, I dismounted and drank of the water and received strength to pursue my journey, which many feared I would be unable to do. I was then," he said, "caught away in the Spirit to the valley of the Great Salt Lake, and saw myself with many others in a holy temple where the 12 apostles presided. The house was filled with the glory of God, and in a room adjoining the main one in which I sat was Jesus, the Redeemer of the world. I did not see him, but knew he was there. Lucifer also appeared, claiming to be the Christ and offering free salvation to all who would accept him as their ruler without any church obligations. He was finely dressed in black and very genteel, until he discovered that no one paid any attention to his sophistry when he became enraged and threatened to tear down the temple and destroy the kingdom of God on the earth. When, as commanded, he left the house, and all was calm as a summer's morning, and no one seemed to fear any of the threats made or to believe he would have power to do any harm. I awoke," Tyler said, "and the main features of my dream were repeated in open vision, especially as it relates to the temple. From that time, I never doubted but Salt Lake Valley would be the final destination of the outcast saints. When I awoke and found that it was only a dream, the reality of facts did not seem to lessen, but I found my whole being filled with joy and rejoicing, a thrill of gladness pervading my whole soul from my crown to the ends of my fingers and toes." End of quote. So he saw a vision of the Savior, of the Salt Lake Temple, and of the saints gathering in that valley. This is 1847, long before the temple was built. What a remarkable vision. The wild animals he had seen represented all the different kinds of opposition that the battalion men had encountered in their journey back to the saints. And everything he saw came to pass as he saw it. According to that dream, Daniel didn't go south. He went north up California's Central Valley until he reached Sutter's Fort. As I said, every detail of that dream was fulfilled exactly as he saw it, even and especially to the eventual construction of that temple later to be built in the Salt Lake Valley. Now, remarkable dream. There are many takeaways, but one of the ones that stuck out to me was the subtle deceptions, the persuasive sophistries of Lucifer, going to heaven without any church obligations. Sound familiar? And subsequently, his petulant rage when they rejected him. Not much has changed. All that comes from God is good. God brings love, peace, light, joy, contentment, happiness. If it's anything else, well, then it doesn't come from God. I hope you're enjoying the sights and sounds of the sea. Summer 1854, somewhere on the high plains of the Oregon Trail. Louise Graehl and her husband had come from the old country to journey to a new home in the American West. They had many adventures out on the trail. One time, for instance, they were caught in a stampede. Their oxen ran crazily across the rough ground, dragging their heavy laden wagon with little effort. In the back, in the wagon, the family was tossed about wildly in terror. When the wagon finally stopped, the family was more than glad to get out of the wagon and walk back to camp. Louise was walking back with one little girl in one arm and a baby in the other, walking through tall prairie grass. And she said, quote, "There were snakes among the grass, which frightened me very much." Nevertheless, Louise and her babies made it back to camp safely, though they were late for supper. Somewhere across the open spaces of the trail, her husband George became so ill that he was unable to drive the team or even walk. He was reduced to riding in the wagon almost as an invalid, which left Louise to drive the oxen and tend to the children. She said it was a rough job, pretty hard job to help driving through a long summer day with a baby in my arms and another at my side crying to be picked up. Can you imagine how tough that would be? Well, one day, it was just getting towards evening. Louise was far behind the rest of the company. It was just coming sunset when the yoke binding her oxen to the wagon broke, and her oxen took off running and ran all the way into the camp of the saints, about 2 miles away, leaving Louise stuck all alone back on the trail with her wagon right in the middle of the road. She described that as darkness closed in that night, so did the wolves. Not coyotes, wolves. Wolves closed in on the wagon. Louise said, "I couldn't light a fire. I had no materials." Now picture this. "So I sat on the front seat, holding my axe in my hands, ready to defend myself and dear ones from the wolves who were howling around. I waited until midnight when 2 brothers came for us. They made a big fire to scare the wolves away, and we slept by turn until morning." End of quote. That story has always captivated me. The grit, the courage of that pioneer woman. Somehow that vision of a young mother with 2 little babies holding an axe, keeping the wolves at bay to protect her family through the dark of the night in a desolate wilderness. Something about that is inspiring. Something about that just says this is what pioneers were all about. You know, I have to say, you and I don't really know who we are or what we are capable of until we're put to the test to find out. I'll tell you more about that next week. Okay? Let's take a break for a second. Okay, coming up this year are 2 tours I wanted to make mention of to you, and there's still some openings on these tours if you want to go. The buzz down here in San Diego, and I heard it in sacrament meeting this morning, is that the San Diego Temple is about to open. And when it does, we're taking a group and we're coming down from Idaho through Utah all the way down here to San Diego, and we're going to attend the San Diego Temple Open House. That tour will be on the 19th of June. We'll be gone for about 5 or 6 days. Along the way, we're going to talk about the Mormon Battalion. We're going to see their history and their sites, visit Old Town San Diego, and probably take in something like SeaWorld while we're down here as well. That's the San Diego Temple Open House Tour. That will be June 19th. If you're interested in that tour, go to TetonStagelines.com. The other tour that I wanted to make mention to you still has some openings. For those of you that love the pioneers, for those of you that love to hear stories about the pioneers and learn more about them, come with me on the 27th of May. We're taking a group and we're going out on the Oregon-California Mormon Pioneer Trail from Chimney Rock back into Salt Lake, May 27th. We'll see the places, we'll hear all the stories, we'll get a feeling, we'll immerse ourselves for 4 days in the lives of the pioneers. What was it like to be one? You'll have a better feeling than you've ever had before about what it was like to really be a pioneer. That's on the 27th of May, just a little over a month, and there's still seats available. Again, that tour is at TetonStagelines.com. Or if you want, if you'd prefer to talk to a real person, call Dennis, my partner, 801-541-9760. Again, if you want to talk to Dennis about it, he can help you. 801-541-9760. All right, next story. May the 3rd, 1856. Brigham Young called David H. Cannon into his office and asked him to make a journey out here to California for a special mission. The next day, David Cannon packed up and left Salt Lake City, coming west. He came to a place called Johnson's Ranch at the foot of the Sierra Nevada range, where he was then told about a shortcut over the mountains. Quote, "If I would go right up the mountain there," David said, "I would save 40 miles in going from there to Sacramento." He said he would have to follow the blazed trees, that the path was not a clear one. Well, anxious to be on his way, David took the shortcut. But as it got darker, he couldn't see the marks on the trees and was very soon lost. He wandered the rest of that night and all the next day. Finally, tired, hungry, and discouraged, he began to rethink, why am I out here in the first place? What are you going for? And what are you going to do after you get there? This is all David's inner conversation. Finally, he knelt down and he told the Lord of his condition, how he was lost, and was it right for him to be out here on this mission in the first place? David said, I told him I knew this to be his work, and if it was right for me to go on this mission, to make it manifest by opening the way before me, and that if it was not proper, I did not care to go on. End of quote. Well, at the end of his prayer, David laid down and he went to sleep and slept soundly. The next morning he woke up, he was refreshed, and he walked on. He's still lost, doesn't know where he's going. He came to a small meltwater stream, washed his face, washed his hands, and again felt prompted to pray. Quote, I told the Lord, just as I had the night before, that if it was right for me to go, that the way be open, and it should be as an enduring testimony to me. End of quote. Well, he hadn't gone too far out on the main road, still uncertain which way to go, and he hesitated. And then he felt prompted to walk toward the town of Genoa, which logic told him was the wrong way. He hadn't gone very far when he saw, sitting by the side of the road, neatly placed atop a rock, a loaf of bread and a griddle cake. He looked around. There was no one near. I gathered it up, he said, and didn't stop to ask where it came from. I thought about my prayer the night before and my prayer of that morning. David concluded by saying, "Someone might say that this was not any manifestation of the powers of the Lord. Yet, I never doubted from that time to this, but what that was a direct answer to my prayer." End of quote. He went on, taking it as a sign from the Lord, and fulfilled the assignment and mission given by President Young faithfully. There are miracles which some would say aren't, but you and I know that where they really come from. And recognizing the Lord's hand in all things is the first step in becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ. All right, next story. June 15th, 1875, Eddington, England. James was 11 years old, and he was not yet baptized. His father vowed that if James could just survive this last bout of illness, that he would baptize his son and not put it off any longer. James had been weak and sick for a long time and unable to be baptized. If he recovered, he was now going to baptize him. Well, June 15th, 1875, James was well. The time had come. But they couldn't baptize him openly, publicly during the day because of the opposition of the local residents. So shortly before midnight, James's father went out and surveyed the area near the Kennet River Bridge where the service was going to be performed. There was no one out there. No one was around. James's father went back out that night and checked one more time just to be sure that all was quiet and safe. When it was, James accompanied his father out to the mill race that ran parallel to the Kennet River. His father stepped into the water and took James by the hand as if to lead him down, and just then James said, quote, "We were veritably horror-stricken by a combined shriek, yell, scream, howl. I know not how to describe the awful noise, such as none of us had ever heard. It seemed to be a combination of every fiendish cry we could conceive of. I remember how I trembled at the awful manifestation, which had about it the sharpness and volume of a thunderclap, followed by an angry roar, which died away as a hopeless groan. The fearsome sound seemed to come from a point not more than 50 yards from us, near the end of the great bridge." He continued, "The night was one of bright starlight, and we could have seen anyone on the bridge, which was built of white stone with low walls. Father, who was also trembling, asked me if I was too frightened to be baptized. James said I was too terrified to speak. So I answered by stepping into the water, and I was baptized." End of quote. After the baptism was concluded, James and his father looked around about the bridge. There was no one there. Later on, they asked. No one in the small community seemed to have heard that, quote, blood-curdling shriek. But James said, "We heard it, and we shall never forget it." End of quote. That story brings to light a principle taught by the prophet Joseph Smith. The greater we make an effort, paraphrasing, to do good, the greater the forces of opposition of the adversary will be arrayed to stop us. The more you try to do good, the more you will be opposed. And by the way, just for the rest of the story, James was Elder James E. Talmage, who wrote the book, Jesus the Christ. Mary Graham was born April the 4th, 1830, in Glasgow, Scotland. By the age of 14, Mary's mother had passed away and the family moved to Kirkintilloch, Scotland. At the time, an elder from the church knocked on the door. According to family records, all he did was leave a tract with them. Mary's father, who was on his deathbed, read the tract and proclaimed, quote, "Mary, my girl, that is true. I believe that. I believe that young man has come with the true gospel. I won't be able to remain long with you, but you look for the true gospel described in this tract, and if ever you find it, you can safely embrace it." End of quote. Well, Mary's father died, and she became an orphan. She went to work for a family named Allen. Mary then found that where they were, there were Latter-day Saints meeting, and so she joined with them. However, when the Allen family that she stayed with discovered that she was associating with the Mormons, they were angry. Rumors convinced them that Mary's associations would be hurting their family business, and they gave her a bitter ultimatum. "Mary, there's the door. You take your choice right now. Either our home and give up Mormonism, or out of our home and into the night." End of quote. What a choice. Mary cried, but with grit and courage that became characteristic of the rest of her life, she replied, quote, "I would be falsifying if I said it was not true. My father told me it was true when he was on his deathbed, and I know it is true for myself." End of quote. With 1 shilling in her pocket, Mary was sent out into the night. She took that shilling and went to the owner of the town hall and asked to rent the hall as a place for the elders to preach. 1 shilling was not enough, but because the man knew Mary's father and honored him, he gave her the hall for 1 shilling. When the elders discovered what the courageous teenager had done, they gave her a blessing, promising that she would never want. In March 1852, Mary married Archibald Miller Young, Jr. She taught him the gospel, he was baptized, and together the two of them would have 13 children. In 1872, Mary and her family immigrated to Zion. The family records state this: when they arrived in Salt Lake City, the Allen family was there to welcome them and took them to their home for a wonderful banquet. "You are the cause of our being in the church," they declared. When Mary had so courageously left their home in Scotland rather than give up the true faith, the Allen family concluded that her religion must be something extraordinary. They knew she was one of the sweetest, best, and most beautiful girls of their acquaintance. Mr. Allen said, now this is the family that kicked her out, "I cannot help but feel that there is something more to Mormonism than we understand. It cannot be just a man-made religion." He and his family investigated, joined the church, immigrated to Utah, and welcomed Mary and her family when they arrived. Mary went on to live a life of courage, faith, and obedience in Zion. Just before she died in 1911, Mary called her children to her and told them this story, particularly of the blessing given by the elders when she was 14 years of age that she would never want. And then she declared, quote, "You, my children, may never be asked to give all you have for the gospel's sake. But if you are, give it. I would like you to be as liberal with the Lord as He has been to you. I am 80 years of age, and I have never wanted." That blessing has been fully realized. So I leave this with you, children, that even if it takes the last cent you have for the church, it is the finest thing you can ever do. End of quote. That testimony left a lasting impression on Mary's posterity. I hope that that story and the law of consecration may likewise stick to you for the rest of your days. My dear friends, from the Pacific coast of California near Oceanside, good night. God bless, and I'll see you